Okay, then with the gun in this, like this is just the main valve operating part of the gun. This is fully functional even outside of the plastic gun. And what we're going to do now is you'll see that the wires for the solenoid go behind the silver screw at the top here, and we'll take the solenoid off and show you that. And there's two silver screws and little brass cups. Now when you take the cup off, you'll notice that the flat surface of the cup is at the top. Flat surface at the top, and then it's hollowed out on the bottom, and that fits over the boss, which is on the main part of the gun body down here. So we'll take those off, move them out of the way. Okay, then off comes the solenoid, and the main part of the gun's left in your hand. Now you're going to notice here that there are, try and get it right in the camera, there's the two mounting bosses, front and back, and then there are 3 O-rings. And those O-rings form the seal between the solenoid and between the gun and allow the transfer of gas from one area of the gun to another. Now what's very important is this second O-ring here and the hole. And if you look down into there, there should be a little white piece called a restrictor, and that restrictor is extremely important to the gun's operation. What it does is it allows gas into the area behind the bolt, but it does it very slowly, so it reduces the speed and the force of the initial part of the bolt stroke to make it gentler on the paint. But when the gas is coming back out, it opens up to allow the gas to evacuate more quickly. Now it's very important that you have that restrictor in the gun. If you don't have that little white restrictor piece in here, the gun will shoot, but you might break paint, and it'll feel very clanky when it's actually firing. And it's almost always because that little restrictor is missing. Now, there's no way for that restrictor to get out of the gun apart from somebody disassembling it, not realizing it should be there, and having it fall out. Normally it stays in the gun pretty well. Yep, and this one doesn't actually want to come out. But a small amount of grease on here also helps hold it in when you're assembling the gun. And just make sure that before you put the solenoid on, that is in place and correct. It's very important that it's put in the correct way as well. When you look at the small little white restrictor, on the top end of it are a series of holes which we call the crown. Now that has to go into the hole first. So it goes in crown first into the hole. And then you're going to put the solenoid back on. The solenoid itself is a lot simpler and more robust than the solenoids that you get with most other paintball guns, and it is actually user serviceable. You'll see that on one end you have this brass area with an Allen key location in it, and it's going to make me a liar. Oh, there you go. It is tight, but it will undo. Okay. And on this piece you're going to see that there is a brass, this is the brass piece. On the top end there's an O-ring which is sealing off the solenoid, and at the bottom there is a little volcano-like piece which is where the seal actually works in the solenoid. Then you get the silver cap, the little top hat, and then what we also get, which isn't going to want to come out easily because it's being held in. Oh, there you go. Now this is the actual spool that moves back and forth in the gun and controls the gas flow. And you'll see there's a little face seal on the end of the brass end, which is sprung loaded, and there's a little face seal on the other end as well. And when this moves back and forth in the solenoid, this controls the gas flow. And that's pretty much all there is inside here. There is also another little bushing piece, but you don't need to worry too much about that. And then the rest of it is just the coil. Now if you do have problems with the solenoid sticking, it's very easy to take this apart. Make sure that there's no debris in here. You can clean this off, polish it, put a very, very small amount of lubricant just on your tips of your fingers and just brush it over to make sure that it's lubed, but you don't want to gunk it up with a lot of lubricant. Clean it all off, and then you can drop all these parts back in and you can check that it's working good. You want to look inside this part, maybe clean it out with a Q-tip, make sure there's no dirt or debris in there, and that's pretty much all there is to the solenoid. And we're going to put that back together. piece is going to fit down in first. Okay, and then silver part first. Try and show you this. Silver part first from the plunger, and it's a good idea to take a little silver cap, put it on top. Make sure, let me show you that again actually. When you put the top hat in, try and get it on camera. When you put the top hat in, you want the brim facing up, so it fits down into the recess around the armature, and it'll just drop in nice and sit flush. Okay, and then once that's in, you simply take your top brass piece and you'll push it all down in, and you'll tighten that screw up just enough that it crushes the O-ring and creates the seal. And that's all there is to the solenoid. It's actually very easy, very user friendly. Okay, what we'll do right now is we'll put this back onto the main valve body, so we don't have to worry about it, and we don't have to worry about losing the restrictor while we go through the rest of the gun. Now, before we put this back on, the first thing we do is we take a look and we make sure that the little white restrictor is in the second hole, and it is. And then we're going to put this back on, make sure that the wires are out of the way and that it's sitting flush down onto the O-rings. The rear wire is going to come around past where the mount is. I'm going to take my little rear brass cap, keep the wires in place, put the screw in, grab the correct Allen key and just roll it down, making sure that you do not pinch the wires, but that the wires are held behind that brass and silver screw. Make sure you don't pinch the wires, but that it's held into place. Makes it easier to assemble the gun later. And we're going to drop the front one on, and again remember that the recess in the brass piece goes down over the boss and the flat surface is facing up for us to put the screw onto, and we just tighten that down too. Here's a big hint that I'm trying to teach everybody in paintball, but often failing. When it comes to using Allen keys and paintball products, there really isn't any need to use the long arm to tighten things down. You end up putting way too much force on almost every single thing when you tighten it that way. What's a good idea is to use the long arm to untighten and to loosen screws, but when you come to tightening them, use the short arm and just use fingertip pressure on the short arm to tighten the screws. And that is always enough pressure to tighten things down. If you use the long arm, sometimes you end up stripping screws, and that definitely isn't a good thing. Okay, so now the solenoid is back into place.